what can you tell us about eyedropper pens and unexpected blobs of ink? I have less of that problem when I don't let the fill get below 50%, but that defeats the purpose of the larger capacity. Are nicer pens like the Edison less prone to this problem? And if so, why? Okay, yep, so I definitely get this question sometimes, and it's certainly frustrating when you do get blobs. It is kind of defeating when you have this large ink capacity and you can only use half of it. Now it depends on the size of the pen. There's some pens like the Noodler's Ahab where that thing, when you eyedropper fill it, you can fit 6 milliliters of ink in there. So even if you're only doing it halfway, it's still 3 milliliters of ink, which is a huge ink capacity. So, you know, in that kind of situation, it still would be advantageous even if you're only filling it halfway, because you're getting more than double the amount of ink as you would when using the piston mechanism. You know, and it's kind of the same thing with Edison too, because you're going to be able to fill, oh gosh, I don't remember exactly. I think it depends on the model of pen, but you're going to be able to get several milliliters of ink in that pen as opposed to just the cartridge or the converter. So it still is probably going to be advantageous for you to do that, as long as you're not like cleaning out your colors all the time, because then that could be kind of annoying. But that really kind of defeats the purpose of the eyedropper as well. I would think it's just if you want to use one color kind of continuously, that's when the eyedropper really is best. So you got kind of a couple different questions in here. You know, does that defeat the purpose? A little bit, but it's not always like every pen will absolutely blob. It does kind of depend on the pen. I wish I could say like the exact parameters of why and how that happens. A lot of times it depends on how you hold your pen, your environment, and so on. What's happening with that blobbing is, I'm just going to use the TWSBI as an example, even though it's not an eyedropper pen. So when you're holding your pen, your hand is covering parts of the pen, and the heat from your hand is going to heat up the pen, and it's going to heat up the air inside your ink chamber. And the more air that's in there, meaning the lower your ink level, the more pressure is being built up as the heat builds up in the air inside your pen. Eventually, it may be that the heat causes the pressure to increase so much, and there's only one place that the pressure can release, and that's through the nib. So one way that could help with that is, you know, kind of periodically just turning your nib upside down so that the heat can kind of escape out through the nib like that. That might be one way to help. It's not a surefire way because there's still ink in the feed and stuff like that, so it would have to like bubble all the way out and it would still kind of blob a little bit. So that may or may not help. You know, it might be the kind of situation like it could help if you're transporting the pen, especially if you're moving from like a really cold to a really hot environment, making sure you always transport it nib up. It's usually a good practice anyway, but you know, doing it that way the pressure stays kind of regulated, I guess, and as opposed to if you have it where the nib is pointing down and your ink is staying down at the nib end of the pen, the air inside here is just going to stay in there, and if you're holding it or if it's really hot outside in your car, whatever, that's going to cause the pressure to increase and want to come out. So that's kind of why it's happening. And your second kind of part of the question is, you know, are nicer pens like Edison's less prone to doing it? I hear less about Edison pens doing it because I think that less Edisons are being converted to eyedroppers on a regular basis. Just in general, they're more expensive pens. There's not as many people that have them. Those that do, how many of those people are eyedropper converting them, as opposed to something like a Kaweco or Noodler's Ahab or something like that, where it would be far more common for people to eyedropper convert them. You hear more complaints about things like Kawecos and Ahabs leaking because they're much less expensive. So a lot more people have them, and a lot of people get them, especially those Kawecos, because there's really not a good converter for that pen. So a lot of people who want to just not use cartridges will eyedropper convert them. So the ratio of people that are eyedropper converting that pen is just so much higher. So I think that, you know, and because that's a small kind of pocket pen, a lot of people throw them in their pockets, kind of toss them around. So leaking is just much more likely to happen just by the way those pens are used and handled by the general population. So that's kind of my feelings on that. I don't know necessarily if there are like actual reasons, or if it like is a true scientific fact that nicer pens like Edison, you know, have less of a prone tendency to blurb ink in eyedropper conversion. I haven't really done any type of major scientific study and any type of like feedback I've gotten about that. I just don't know, like in terms of a ratio, if it's really any different. My gut tells me it's probably not much different because it's basic physics just that is causing that to happen. And you know, unless like the the heat dispersion of the material that's used is different in like a cast acrylic, you know, an Edison pen versus like an injection molded type thing like a Quaco. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm kind of getting outside of my thing and I'm having to speculate and all that stuff. So I'll just kind of leave it with, I don't know, but you probably shouldn't expect that if you buy an Edison, oh, now I shouldn't have eyedropper blurb problems, because the basic physics is still causing it.